Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie Podcast. I, as always, am your co-host Brian, and joining me, as always, is your co-host Jim.
Bob Ross. Happy Little Trees. No, we were talking about Bob Ross right before the show.
Right
That's
before
all
the
I
show.
can think about now.
Talk
It's
about-
Bob Ross.
Happy Little
Yes.
Clouds.
Joy of Painting in Fallout 4. That's what it was.
Really?
That's what I was looking for. Yep.
There was
I
that
put it in 10 forward.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It is.
Also joining us is your co-host Hunter.
Space! Space, space, space!
Okay.
Space.
You sound a little Australian there for a second.
A little New Zealandish.
But you go on.
What we
Also-
got here is an alien in addiction. It's a nasty thing.
What the fuck is that? Excuse me. Sorry. What is that? Is that a thing?
It's your Rowan, I'm guessing.
Oh. I still miss him. I'm sad now. Also joining us is your co-host Spaz.
Hello.
And we have a guest joining us from Dallas, Texas. Do you have a company name or anything, Roy, or is it just Ray, or is it just you?
It's just me.
Joining us from Dallas,
Just Me Games.
Texas, is the founder of Just Me Games, Ray Fowler. Sorry, Ray Fowler.
Hey.
You're going to have to trademark that now before somebody else gets it.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad name. I like that name. You should totally snatch that if you can. Just Me Games. That's great. Why an indie? I'm gonna look that up. But why an indie developer who's just there's so many like solo indie developers. And I'm gonna look it up. But folks, Ray is here to talk about his Master of Orion 1, not 2. Not 2. Let me say that again. We're not talking
And
about
3 is right out.
No, not 3. Not 3. Master of Orion 1 inspired game, Remnants of the Precursors.
Hey, thanks for the invite. It's nice to finally be the normal guy in a group.
Hey, what? What does that mean?
Boom.
This is probably very true.
Well, I'm just listening to everybody's intro. I didn't have a fancy intro to come with, so.
Well, last week we had advertisements.
Yeah, which we should do more. Which we should do more, actually, I think, because that was really great. We should like write up some scripts and try and do that as a thing, because that was actually really funny. Even listening to it afterwards was really funny.
Want to get into space trucking but don't know how? Call up Square Pigs.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that kind of greatness. So Ray, I want to thank you for joining us. Now, I want to talk about a thing, because your game was not always called, I want to start at the very beginning. Your game was not always called Remnants of the Precursors. It used to be called Java Moo, which
That is correct.
Which everyone knows as, Java.
Some kind of cow reference.
Master of, yeah. So how did the project get started? Were you tired of all the Master of Orion 2 wannabes? How did this get off the ground?
Well, it was actually about 10 years ago, in the charred remains of Master of Orion 3, I decided, that I was unhappy with how that turned out, and I was trying to learn Java professionally. So I thought it would be a great idea to learn Java by writing a game. So I started writing a game. I called it Java Moo, and it was really ugly. It was my first attempt at Java, and I got pretty far with it. It was pretty functional. You could, diplomacy, expansion, all that stuff was in the game. It was just very ugly. And then for reasons unrelated to the project, I kind of had to stop working on it. And then a couple of years ago, I decided, hey, I should restart this game, because, I'm a much more experienced developer in Java now. So I thought I could do a better job at it. So I took my source code, my old source code, and restarted the project. And about 4 months after I restarted the project, Wargaming announced that they were going to remake Master of Orion.
Oh,
So yeah. So, but I was calling it Java Moo. And then at some point, I was about to have an alpha, and I contacted Wargaming because I was concerned about, their intellectual property. I mean, I'm a developer, and I respect other people's intellectual property, and I didn't want to use Moo or the Master of Orion name if they weren't okay with it. So I contacted them, and they said they'd been watching a project. They'd been watching a project for a while, and that it was okay. I just couldn't use Master of Orion, but I could continue with the project. And so I renamed it, but I get to keep all the alien names like the Mershon, Klakon, et cetera, et cetera. And I came up with Remnants of the Precursors, mostly because I don't know if you remember, but like in the Master of Orion series, there's this whole lore of the Orions and the Antarans, and I wanted to build up the lore around that, so that's why I called it that name.
No, it's a great name. It's definitely a little has more.
I disagree.
Oh,
It's a mouthful.
it is, but it has more flair to it than Java Moo. But Java Moo is kind of fun to say when you say it out loud.
That is true. I did like the
Java
Javamu name, and
Moo.
when I decided to come up with a new name, I wanted to make sure I didn't do anything like Master of Orion. I didn't want any star names. I didn't want it to have Galaxy or Conquest or all these cliched words that we have in these titles.
So you got to get Void in there
I
somewhere.
was gonna say, I'm glad you don't have Void in there because, god damn it,
Or Stellar.
so many games with
You
Void.
have avoided void.
Yeah. Oh, god, fuck, son of a bitch.
Yeah, I went there.
Hey, I heard weird trivia this morning
Uh-huh.
on the way in. They were talking about the Noid from
The
Domino's.
Domino's thing.
Yeah, and apparently, because they were talking about the old game Avoid the Noid or whatever it was. There was like a Super Nintendo game or something way back in the land about the Noid, and so apparently there was some crazy person whose last name was Noid, and he thought that all the Domino's stuff was a personal attack on him. So he went into a Domino's with a gun and like held the place up for hours, hostages and stuff. And that's apparently why Domino's just dropped the whole Noid thing.
That's pretty crazy.
What?
Yeah, I'll have to Snopes it, but that's what got said. And I was just like, what?
Wow. Okay. Well, learn something new every day. But
Snopesing now.
wow, really? Come on, man. Annoyed? That's in so many things. That word. Annoyed. But yeah, no. I mean, it's kind of sad you had to change your name. But I mean, one thing about your name is it is in all these space games that are coming out. It is pretty unique. Yes,
Well,
yes, it's
so-
a mouthful. Sorry, I was just gonna say yes, it's a mouthful, but it kind of has to be. I feel like these days. Sorry, continue.
Oh, and by the way, it's true. Pizza workers can't avoid the Noid. Held hostage 5 hours. LA Times. There you go. And it happened in LA, so it's Brian's fault.
All
right, go on.
Go on. Sorry,
Brian.
I wasn't in LA at the time. Anyway,
Oh.
I was Moon. I was with Steve.
So what I was going to say is, if for people who don't like the name, my theory about names is there's usually not really a good name. What makes a name good is if the product is good. If the product is good, then people will go, oh, that's a great name. I mean, who would have thought Apple was a good name for a computer, right? But because they made a quality product, we associate Apple and we think, oh, that's a great name. So as long as I make a good game, I don't really think the name matters.
no. I mean, the name is important, but yeah, the gameplay is what's really important. And speaking of the game, I played a bunch of it to record footage that folks watching the stream might be watching. And I gotta say, you did an excellent job of capturing the mix of depth and still simplicity that Master of Orion really inhabits. So kudos to you. Now, folks, if you're wondering what we're talking about, 1993 saw the first of the Master of Orion games from Simtex, right? Simtex, who went
Right.
on to make Master of Orion 2, Master of Magic. And while a lot of people try and copy Master of Orion 2,
Several, many,
and so
almost
many.
everyone.
Many.
So many. Not hardly anyone is trying to capture, and I have a theory about this, but I wanted to talk to you about it. Not many people are trying to capture the simple splendor that is Master of Orion 1. And I think that might be a part of it because the design of Master of Orion 1 is, if you just look at it, it looks like a much simpler game than Master of Orion 2. And in some ways it is. It doesn't have like all the features that Master of Orion 2 does, but it's just as deep a game. It's just so much more efficient to play. And I'm wondering if that's why a lot of people don't try and copy it, because that is really hard to emulate.
Well, I think it's a lot more about fleet management instead of like I have to go down on the planet and decide like how many farmers are planting crops this year. Because it's all sliders and
Which is great.
But that's a really good point, because one of the key differences between the first Master of Orion and the second Master of Orion is the player focus. Because the colony management in the first game was so streamlined, the player's focus was on moving out, managing his fleets, encountering other races, expanding through the galaxy. But in Master of Orion 2, you have to do so much colony management that your focus tends to go inwards to your empire of, micromanaging and making sure it's developing perfectly. And it's a completely different feel to the game.
Yeah, it really does. You're right. And I played the second one first. I only played the first one like earlier this year for the first time, really. And I was just blown away by, like, I don't need to tell it which buildings to build. I just say, work on spread these resources out between industry and defense and whatnot. And that's just so brilliant.
Right.
It's so efficient.
Well, it's like the colony is going to take care of itself. They're not all going to just starve to death. It's a viable thing at some point, right? And it's not, the thing that I like about it is it's not like, well, this planet does nothing but produce industry, and that planet over there does nothing. The thing that I like about it corn. So it's that kind of deal, right? So you don't have like a monoculture planet that just does one thing. It's like a planet's a planet. Like you look at Earth, right? It's like we do our food, we do our industry, but it's what's the surplus that's coming out of here that you kind of control. So it's like, I'm going to lean it this way. This is what I want them to export.
Yeah, and with this game and Master of Orion, you don't have to worry really about exports and things. You just move population around to get the colonies to build out a little faster. It makes for a much more fast-paced game too. Like
that's right.
In the video, I played a half an hour game and I already got to war with one race and bombarded one of their colonies into oblivion in a half an hour. With a lot of more MMO2 focused games, you're like still freaking exploring after half an hour, which is fine, but like it makes for a different pace and a different game, and your game captures that really well.
Well, there's a lot to be said for a game that you can play in an evening if you want and still have the full, experience of expanding through galaxy and taking it over, if you're playing a small map.
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually playing I think a large or a huge map, and I still got into a scruff with a neighbor not too long in. So yeah, I really like what's going on here. Now, you were saying something, I wanted to talk about this earlier. You were saying that you have the Master of Orion strategy guide as kind of like a guide to making your game. You kind of use that as a reference, I'm guessing, I think you said?
Yeah, the Master of Orion strategy guide from the first game is so well written, and in fact, it's not just that one, but other guides from that era are. But that guide launched the careers of a lot of indie developers, I think, because it didn't just tell you strategies in the game, but it explained how underlying mechanics worked. So someone who, let's say, who was a programmer would read that book and they would come away thinking, "Oh, I could write this game," right? And so I think that's why, a lot of people want to do Space 4X games, because it seems so obvious once you read that guide.
And folks, two of the best guides I think ever made are the Master of Orion and Master of Magic strategy guides. If you want some really great reading, track copies of those down. Printed copies, not PDFs. Printed copies.
And also the original guide from Civ 1, I think it was called like Rome on 640K
Yeah,
a day.
I've been
That's a
trying
great
to
one too.
I've been trying to track down a copy of that myself, and that one's hard to find because I didn't really play much Civ 1, and so but I've heard that guide is amazing. I could talk about strategy guides all night. I love just reading through them.
Well, they're all written by Alan Emmerich, and he's the guy who came
Yeah.
up with the term 4X.
Yeah. Yeah, folks, if you don't know, the term 4X actually came from a review written by Alan Emmerich of the original Master of Orion game. So there were 4X games before Master of Orion, like Civilization and was it Stellar Crusade and Reach for the Stars and a few others, but they weren't really called 4X games. They were just, I guess, called strategy games or war games. But Master of Orion helped coin the term. So there's a lot of reverence for this game, which again just kind of blows my mind why it's not being emulated more often than its own sequel. But,
Well, I think part of that is because the sequel sold so well, right?
it did.
You know,
Yeah.
when Master of Orion 2 came out, there was at the time, it's kind of hard to believe now, but Master of Orion was probably considered the superior 4X game of the time. And so when Master of Orion 2 came out, you know, it would just had huge sales. People jumped on it. And so if you were being introduced to that genre for the first time, why would you go back and play the first Master of Orion when the sequel was already out and on sale, right? People didn't realize they were vastly different games.
That's where I was. Yeah, like I bought the original off the shelf back in the day because all these other people were interested, and I'm like, I should try this. It was one of my first strategy games, really. Like before that, it was Ascendancy, and then that, pretty much. So yeah, I'm like, why would I go back to the first one? It looks so much different and simpler. That was a mistake.
And the graphics haven't aged well. They're very dated, so it's
No.
very easy for someone to pull up that game. It wasn't made for Windows, right? So it's just
No.
very hard to get into if you've never played it before.
Yeah, and the UI is very early 90s. Very, very, very DOS early 90s.
Yeah, what was the minimum spec to run Mu 1? Was it like
Oh.
386, 486?
God, I don't even know.
386 and I think 2 megs of RAM.
Oh, God. 2 megs. God.
Yeah, that was a lot of RAM back then.
Back in 93, yeah, I think I had to upgrade to 4 megs of RAM just to run Privateer. I think run it well on my 486 back in the day. Oh my God. How far we've come. But it's kind of neat because you've kind of kept a lot of
Someone
Are you
died?
okay?
What happened?
Nicole is where okay, folks, I usually have push to talk. And so usually if I wasn't talking, you wouldn't be able to hear that. But Nicole is doing wedding stuff right now. And a lot of our stationery is in here in the office. So she was getting a soda, which is on a shelf nearby, and some station.
That's what I was doing.
What were you? What were you doing?
It was much dumber than that.
Okay, what was it?
I was trying to
People
open
want to
the
hear.
door.
People want to hear.
It was a domino effect.
Okay,
I
you're
opened the door.
open the door.
And then the soda, which is balanced on top of other soda.
Uh-huh.
And now I know what you're gonna say.
Uh-huh.
But it's also balanced on an IKEA shelf that's very rickety.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't my fault. It was
A rickety IKEA shelf. Who thought, huh?
I know, right?
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Anyway. Sorry about that. Nice little
Special guest.
special guest. That was my fiance. What were we talking about? No, I was gonna say that the interface of your game kind of stays true to the spirit of the original game, but is much more user friendly at the same time. Like, how did you accomplish that? Because it mirrors the original very closely, but is feels much more modern. You know, it feels.
I'm glad you noticed that. I'm sorry, someone was talking.
No, that was me. Go ahead.
Okay, because for starters, I really don't like any of the interfaces of modern Space 4X games. Stellaris, Gal Civ, Endless Space. I feel like they're all copying each other and they're all very derivative. And so when I was remaking Master of Orion, I basically instructed the graphic designer, I want you to redo these and make them look modernized, but I want you to maintain the same layout and kind of look and feel. And she's done a great job, right? I can't do that. I'm a programmer. I can't make pretty things,
How many
but
people
I
do you
found
have?
somebody who could.
How many people do you have working on this with you?
Okay, so that's a good question. I'm the developer. I have an illustrator, a graphic designer to design all the UIs. I have a writer to do all the writing in the game. There is we've had a musician do some of the music, and there's been 2 guys that have done translations already, and there's a 3rd one working on another. So how many people is that? I don't know.
About half a dozen. It's about half a dozen
Yeah,
people. That's pretty
and
good.
they're all paid.
What? Okay, wait. This is a free game. So how? I don't know if you can tell me. How is that happening?
Well, what happens is I like have money and I exchange it for goods and services.
That's amazing. No, usually you don't hear that. Usually with tiny projects like this, you hear like they're all working for free. They're all volunteers. So no, that's great.
I think that's a disaster waiting to happen, to be honest with you, because
Mm,
if you have somebody working for free, then they don't really have any investment or skin in the game. And so if they burn out or leave, you can't do anything about it. I think it's best to pay people for their time, right? These are professionals. I mean, everyone I've hired, well, except for the translators, are actually professionals in what they're doing. And so I pay them, right? I mean, that's I would expect to be paid for my work. So I try to honor that.
and it's kind of interesting that it, it's kind of interesting you have that philosophy because we don't talk about that kind of thing very often. We don't ask about it. Money usually doesn't come up, but like the only time that does come up is like when a developer says they have volunteers working for them. So it's really great that not only do you have a free product, but that you're compensating the people who are working on it. That's really commendable. I think it would be the word I'd use. Um, do you have a full time gig that you help pay for?
Oh yeah,
This?
oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm a full-time software developer, and I've been
Oh,
a professional programmer for about 25 years, since so I can afford to do this. This is really a nice hobby for me, to be perfectly
that is
honest.
great. I mean, the great thing about that is, I think some of the best developers we've talked to are the ones that aren't financially relying on their project, so it could be truly a labor of love, and not have that pressure, that monetary pressure weighing them down.
Right. Nothing I do reeks of desperation with this project.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm not trying to. And I hope any developers listening don't think I'm talking about them or anything. I mean, money is an issue, but every now and then we talk to a developer. It's like, no, I'm good. I just do this for love. I don't make anything. I'm like, wow, all right. Like we had one developer who was like, I don't care if it sells or not. I'm good. I'm like, okay, wow.
Well, uh, the game being free kind of comes with some advantages and disadvantages, right? If
Right.
it's free, if I'm not taking money from anybody, I'm not beholden to anybody. I don't have to make game design decisions based upon
Oh,
whether or not I think they'll be profitable or not. I can make the game I want to make that I think I should make as long as I can afford it, right?
of course. I mean, this is your dream project. This is your baby. Absolutely.
Right. And I don't think that everything we do in life needs to be monetized, right? Because I have a lot of people who hear about the game, relatives, friends, coworkers, even people online that tell me like you could sell this game and make a lot of money, and I'm going yes, but that would kind of change the whole project, and I just don't want to do that.
Was part of the terms of you getting to make this that you don't make it profitable? Like if you were going to sell it, then the IP would come down on you, or no?
That is true, but that's not why. It was always going to be free. And for example, I don't think I'm violating any uh, wargaming intellectual property now. But if they came and said, you know what, we don't want you using the name Rashawn or Sakura or whatever, then I would just change it, right? But I wasn't going to sell the original Java Moo. I wasn't going to sell this one. So that's if it was a completely different name, it wouldn't be a problem for me either.
Fair enough.
No, and that is great. That is really great that you're making it free because there are a few games like every now and then people ask me, I want a 4X game that I could play in an evening, you know, and because your game is free, I can easily point to yours. There's like yours and what's the other one? 10-minute strategy. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a 10-minute 4X, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yes.
it's
10
another
minute,
fairly
10-minute
simple.
4X.
Yeah, it's not Master of One-ish. It's more Space Word Ho-ish, if that makes sense.
So,
That didn't come
so
out right.
what
Uh,
about Free Orion?
really
That's
did.
another
What's
open
that?
sourced
Free Orion?
Master
What?
of Orion clone, but they're
It is?
yeah, it's freeorion.org.
It's
Yeah.
it's
But
crowdsourced.
they're doing a yeah, but it's going like far beyond the scope of Master of Orion 1. It's
Right.
become like a wild beast now because they can't stop people from just cramming stuff in it.
Right, and I think they based off of Mu 2, the second Master of Orion. But see, that's another problem too, right? With like crowdsourcing or having an open source game is you get a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? So you may not end up with the game that you started with, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you lose that focus when you have multiple people putting their
Yeah, at that point
ideas
you
into
got
a
designed
project.
by a committee.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Which
and that is kind of an interesting dynamic I've had to deal with, right? Because, I've said I'm going to open source this game when I'm done with it. And a lot of people, try to provide like constructive criticism. You should do this. You should do this. Wouldn't it be great if you did this? And I have to tell them that, guys, I'm not crowdsourcing the design. I'm making this game, right? And I don't know how you say that without being rude. It's like, I appreciate your input, but you'll get to do all of that once you have access to the source code. I'm not going to do it, right?
that is really amazing though that you're going to be giving access to the source code once you feel it's done and ready to do so. That's pretty darn great. Now my question is why Java? That's my question. I mean, I got nothing against Java. It's just most people use Unity these days or Unreal, So, what was there a specific thing about Java? It's because you knew it, or was there some other reason you chose it for the backbone of this game?
Well, when I first started the project like 10 years ago, I actually started the project to learn Java. So Java is the most used programming language in the world. So if I'm going to open source something, it makes sense to use the language that more people would have access to. But I understand your point. I get a lot of criticism from people, or constructive criticism, of course, about, Java's not the best language, it's not fast enough. And I think my coworkers know me, and they're probably going to laugh when I say this, but I'm very much a performance oriented programmer in most of my career. So when people say Java is going to be slow, I'm like, well, I guess I'll just have to make my Java game run faster than your game because I can do it, right? So I see it as a challenge now.
That's actually pretty great. Because yeah, you don't run into a lot of Java-based games these days anymore, do you? I don't think I really don't.
No, and it's I think Minecraft was Java, but they used
Was it?
the video card, yeah. But see, I'm
It
not even
was, yeah.
using it. I'm not even using the video card. Everything I'm writing is in straight Java. So there's no Unity, there's no OpenGL stuff. I don't use the video card at all. It all runs on the CPU, which actually gets me a lot of advantages because I don't have to worry about video card compatibilities. I don't have to worry about DirectX or anything like that. I can just say, take this game, play it, it'll run. It'll run on a Linux box, it'll run on Mac, it'll run on Windows, it'll even run on the Raspberry Pi.
Wait, what? It'll run on a Raspberry Pi?
Actually, I have a friend at work who's running on a Pi Zero.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
So is this the point where I should like let everybody know what my plans for world domination are?
Sure. If you have some, why not?
Okay,
So basically the 4X, he has become so immersed in that now it's bleeding over into real life, and he's got
that's right.
This game
This game is me manifesting 4X in real life, right? So here's the deal. I think the original Master of Orion is like a great design, right? It's like a diamond in the rough because, it's getting so old and it's hidden behind this horrible old dated UI. But my goal for this game, and don't laugh, you can laugh if you want, I don't care, is to make this game I'm making the most played Space 4X game in the world.
Ambitious, but I mean, hey, you gotta have some high goals, right?
Well, I mean, it works on all these varied platforms. It works on a variety of configurations. Again,
Let me
Master of
explain.
Orion.
Yeah.
Yeah, Master of
Let me
Orion.
explain.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead. You're probably pretty much going to say what I'm going to say. The way I see it, I've got it broken down. There's 4 things I need to have happen to reach that goal. 1, it needs to be a good game. People have to want to play it, right? That makes obvious sense.
Absolutely.
And Master of Orion is like a classic. So as long as I can make a faithful Master of Orion 1 remake, with a modernized interface, I think I cover that. Number 2, it needs to be affordable, so as many people as possible can afford to play it. I've got that covered. It's going to be free. Anyone should be able to afford this, right? Number 3, it needs to play on as many different hardware platforms as possible. So it's written in Java, so it'll run on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I've tuned the specifications. I've worked on the performance code so much that it'll actually run on systems as small as a Pi Zero, which is a $5 computer. So now we're talking about a game that can play on just about anybody's computer. It's free, and it's a decent game to play. The last thing I need to do, and this is something I don't have a lot of control over, but people listening could probably help if they wanted to, is I need the game to be translated into as many languages as possible. So I'm hoping that by the time the game goes gold in about a year or so, it'll be in about 20 or 30 different languages at that point.
Holy
And at
crap.
that point, you're going to look at a good game that's free, that'll play on anybody's computer and crosses language barriers. So at that point, I don't see how any commercial game, which can't do those things, is going to be able to compete for gathering the player base. Because after that, it's all marketing.
And since you're going open source, people can make maps, people can make scenarios, people can mod the game. Holy crap. Well done.
So I'm not saying it'll happen. I'm just saying there's a path there.
No, it's a good plan. It's a good plan. I mean, I've probably put an hour or so into the alpha. And I had a great time just chugging around, moving ships around, dealing with other empires and stuff. And I gotta say, the other empires, their AI, even at this early stage, was not bad. Yeah, they were fairly aggressive. They spied on me a lot, which I loved. I'll be honest with you. I thought that was great. I think espionage, while in a lot of 4X games, isn't as utilized as well as it could be, So it was great to capture all these spies. I think only a few games get espionage really right, So that was really nice to see. I got to give you props on that.
Well, I'm kind of very opinionated about AI and how to do it, and a lot of people have opinions on it.
Let's go down that rabbit hole because I want to know.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, I want to hear
like
this.
a weighted list thing, or how do you accomplish a computer player that can play competently without cheating?
Okay, well, here we go. So I wrote an article on my blog a while back called 9 Ways That 4X AIs Disappoint Us. And the only reason I mentioned that is for some reason that became the most read article on my blog, more than my alpha releases or anything like that. So this is obviously something that a lot of people care about. And my opinion is there's really 2 phases, very simplistically, to making a good AI. The first rule, which they all seem obvious, right, is number 1, don't do stupid things. And the second rule is do smart things. So I think 90% of what we see as intelligence in the real world among people is just us knowing not to do stupid things. And when someone does something smart, we're surprised. We go, "Hey, that was a great idea. That was really clever," right? That's not that common. So my goal, first and foremost, is to focus on things that the AI does wrong, things that when a player sees, it's very obviously wrong. It breaks immersion. Like
Yeah,
it's constantly.
can I
Oh, go ahead. Go, sure.
the deadly sin is whenever I'm turtled up, I have a super strong base, and the AI keeps sending like one ship over to just be obnoxious, right? I've seen this in so many games where and it's not like they're harassing or destroying anything. It's just like they just build a ship and send it over and get it killed, and it does no damage to me.
I
And it's like,
was.
man, why are you doing that over and over?
You want to hear infuriating? I was playing 4X this weekend. I won't say what it is. I'll just say it rhymes with Fendless Race, and at one point I was like, I had a, because in this game, like, you not only scout systems, but you could send probes to planets to do things. So you got to leave your scout there for a while, and this other ship from this other race just sat there the entire time. Maybe it was doing the same thing I was, but the thing is, there were no anomalies disappearing, so it was just like sitting there. So every turn would be like, "There's an enemy ship in this system." Every damn turn, and it was infuriating. And I remember the first game in this system did something very similar. It's like, why is that ship just sitting there? This is stupid.
Well,
So
what's frustrating to me is when new 4X games, the AI makes the same dumb mistakes that 4X games made in the 90s. It's like they still haven't learned how to fix these problems.
well, like, what's an example? What's an example you're thinking of?
Well, like what the other guy said about just one ship coming over at a time, right? Just kind of
Uh,
dribbling over there. That's really annoying. And that was actually one of the things on my list.
Yeah,
yeah.
just when the AI has no idea what your strength is, and it just sends a completely inappropriate force over there to. But then again, as a human, I do that sometimes.
Or
It's
what
like,
about the
oh,
situation?
I can take them, and
But what about the situation where you're like friends with the AI, and all of a sudden, for no reason, he's angry at you and he declares war, and then he doesn't do anything for 30 turns, and then he wants peace. What's up with
mm-hmm.
that? I mean,
I
that's
hate that
really stupid.
so much.
Yeah, that's Galciv.
Oh,
Not to
it's
mention
not
other
just
games.
Galciv. No, I had another game do that recently. Where, like, why are you declaring war on me? Now you're declaring peace the next turn. Okay, sure. Why not? I don't know.
So tell you a funny story about Stellaris. There was a race because I was having trouble with my what do they call that? It's the resource that you get, like your approval rating, right, from your population, and you get approval, you get a boost if you have a rivalry, right? So I declared a rivalry against some empire that was like clear on the other side of the galaxy, right? I'm just like, you guys suck, and I was just like, yeah, I'll declare war even, yeah, huge morale boost, and then just left them alone, right? It's just like, I'm never going over there, and they're gonna have to come through like all that stuff with a fleet to get at me. They're never gonna do it because I'm never gonna provoke them. Oh my god, they showed up on my doorstep with like a 60 bajillion point fleet and just wiped me. And a lesson was learned: don't taunt the AI. I
That's
still don't
actually
know
kind of
how he did
nice.
it, but it was just like there I was trying to like farm Cold War bonus out of him, and he went hot.
I have to admit, I'm not a fan of that mechanic in Stellaris. The whole
No, I
rivalry
think it's a
thing.
little bit weird. Like, why would I have to be aggressive? I guess
Yeah,
it forces aggression like that, but
yeah, and I
yeah.
don't want to be aggressive. I just want to research stuff and explore stuff. Leave me alone. I don't want to fight you. That's all I want.
But you should be punished for that, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, okay, so
it's
that
ultimately uniting people against a common enemy because you're declaring them an enemy. Therefore, they should rally to your cause. But even saying that as lore doesn't necessarily make sense because if they don't believe in that cause, it doesn't really matter. Or if you're just going to sit there in a Cold War state for 30 turns or so, then what have you actually accomplished?
Yeah, so it's almost like there should be a diplomacy option of like an agreed upon Cold War, because it makes money for both sides, right? It's just like, yeah, okay, let's declare a not war, and let's saber rattle at each other, and the people will just hand over a lot of money.
That's
And then
kind
Yeah,
of that's
our
kind
But
of what
economy
I
that's
was.
just exploiting the mechanic, though, right?
That's kind of what
No,
was
that's real
happening.
world politics.
But that's kind of what was happening in this game I was playing on the video here. Is that I hadn't declared war against anyone at first, but then I kept capturing these other guys' spies, you know, and they got annoyed with me. I thought that was kind of nice, actually. Like, oh, you want to do it this way, huh? You want to just keep sending spies? All right. And then
In
they
the
got-
game I
You
was
don't play it
playing
like this,
earlier-
eh?
In the game I was playing earlier, they were literally trying to sabotage me every turn, and I was catching their spies every turn.
Which, you know what? That sounds annoying, but it's not. I think that's great. I love that.
Oh, I'm not annoyed by it. I think
Yeah.
it's great because it means, oh yeah, they're doing stuff. They're really trying to hurt me, even
Yeah.
though we're not declared war. They're trying to hurt me.
Exactly.
You know what I would really love to see is what the heck is that game? It's the game about the Cold War in Europe, and
Twilight Struggle.
Twilight Struggle. Thank you,
Uh.
sir. I would like to see a space version of Twilight Struggle. Like, let's make that Klingons and Federation, and call it like Klingon border or something, and it's that.
You know,
it's
you could
Twilight
call it,
Struggle in space.
You call it
Federation and
Axanar.
Empire. Oh, Axanar. No, that's a we won't go there. But yeah, man, I don't understand why something like that hasn't been done. Like, because all these games, right? They get the economy in there, and then they go for the military thing, and then the spying kind of comes in next, and then the diplomacy could maybe be a little deeper than that. And generally, they just never get around to trade, other than, well, I can put a star base out there that's a trade thing, and it makes passive income just for being. But there's no game where it's like you actually have an option to build an economy with other races or something.
Actually, there's one game I was thinking of that can do much of what we're talking about. It's called Seven Kingdoms, if you recall that one. It's got trade, great economics. Probably the best espionage I've seen in any game of its type.
Yeah, well, it's just like, can I just play a game where I'm a badass merchant prince and nobody wants to screw with me because they'll lose access to my sweet deals? No, there's none of that.
I thought that's what those patrician games were.
Yeah, kind of merchant prince and stuff.
Yeah. I
guess you could simulate that with some sort of merchant race. I think Mu 2 had like a merchant race, like the Nolums or somebody.
I think so.
Yeah, but the deal, it's almost like, okay, war is too profitable, because the deal should be like the threat of war is profitable. The actual act of doing it is devastating, right? It's like in World War II, America got a really nice economic boost because we had such geographic separation from where the bombs were falling. But the countries in Europe were basically flat at that point. They had no industry or anything after that till, all the rebuilding. So it's like, you really don't want the war happening in your country or, your space nation or whatever. But it's great to saber rattle, because, that gets a lot of that tax money in the coffers of the military industrial.
You want to be the third party. You want to be the third party that let the other two parties fight amongst themselves, saber rattle as much as possible, and then sell to both sides.
So how about that? Like, I'm the rich empire. I see these two guys squabbling over there, and they come to me and they say, "Hey, can you make us a loan?" I've never had a game where another AI could come up and just be like, "Hey, I need to borrow some money," because it's always like, "Come join me in this war." It's never like, "I'm gonna need about 350."
I think in the original Master of Orion, the AI would occasionally come up to you and demand tribute.
Well, yeah, but that was like, "Give me money or I'm gonna come smack you." I'm talking about like where they say, "Hey, we're losing a war. We could really stand to build some ships. Can we buy some ore from you or something, at debt, right? We'll pay this back or whatever. Because at that point you could become a banker and just win the economic game by letting all the little satellite nations beat the shit out of each other.
I think that's
just control all the loans.
I think that's a pretty tall request for AI. That's a lot of deep thinking, and we have to remember that in most games the AI is added on last after the
Yeah.
features are frozen, and so
So the
that's
AI,
we don't see games like that for a reason.
Yeah. Did you mess around with Pandora? Any? Was it Pandora First Contact, that the 4X that was like on the alien planet and you're trying
Yeah,
to colonize?
the
Okay, so
guy.
the AI was terrible, and then this guy came along and just completely rewrote the AI to the point where they re-released the game with his AI in it. And it's just like, wow, that's a pretty cool fan project. But how much of the AI is exposed out there that he could just rewrite it? Because it's not like he's diving into the source doing stuff. So was all the brains of the AI in XML files that he could just tweak away at, or what?
I thought they did give
And
him access. I thought they actually hired him to
like
actually.
after he had a lot of progress on it.
Well, yeah,
Maybe so. He's doing the AI for Dominus Galaxia now.
yeah, he is.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll go well.
So
I kind of have mixed
but
feelings on that though.
how much AI do you expose in
Why do
text
you?
files that
Well, how?
somebody
Wait,
can
Ray.
edit?
Sorry.
Because he had to be editing something.
Oh, Ray, why do you have?
I
mixed
can't speak
feelings?
to what they're exposing, right? I mean, like in my game, they'll just have access to the source code and they can change it however they want, right?
Okay, so your stuff is not externalized. It's all like in the main, uh, like the subroutines and stuff that you load in, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not like you park a bunch of things out there for people to tweak.
Well, you don't have to do that when you open source the game, right?
Right. But I'm
So-
just wondering why, like, a lot of commercial games have done that, and it's not really like, oh, we intend the fans to tweak this game. I think it was like easier in their development process to do it because they could screw around with it without having to recompile every time or something. But anyway,
You were going to say something?
No, I was one. You said you had mixed feelings about the
Oh yeah. I can
Dominus
explain that.
Galaxia. Yeah.
Well, it's not about Dominus Galaxia. It's about the approach of making a really difficult AI. I think that that's a very risky approach to take for any game. I think most players don't want. First of all, everybody wants to win, right? Everybody wants to win their game. But what players really want is they want to win with at least the illusion that they beat a competent AI. And the problem is if you really work on an AI, and this is what we found out with Pandora, it's not hard to write an AI that can really beat the average player, right? So what happens is when you make this really tough AI, you start trouncing the average player, which is 90% of your player base, and then they leave the game frustrated, and you've only made that 5 to 10% hardcore player base happy, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's
So
all
you
about
have to be very careful.
yeah, it's about striking a balance between um making the player feel like they're accomplishing something and they're a good player versus being challenging. It sounds like.
Right. And I think when Gal Civ 3 came out, Brad Wardell put some metrics in the game, and he found out, and I remember reading this on Explorminate a while back, that 90% of the people who played Gal Civ, and I'm probably not getting the numbers exactly right, but this is the general trend. 90% of the players who played Gal Civ never changed the game from the default easy setting, right? Ever. Which means 90% of the players were just playing to have fun. They weren't looking for a challenge. And it was kind of eye-opening for him. So it kind of makes you think about like how much time do I want to spend making this game, the AI, really challenging when it's really going to frustrate a lot of the players if I'm not careful about it.
Or you end up with a Gandhi in the Civ series where there's just one little line of code that got, well, yeah, one line of code that went squirrely, and it put his his
Right.
nuke tendency from 0 to 10,000 or something to that effect. And that's why Gandhi was throwing nukes, and it's just become mimetics. It's then that Gandhi always throws nukes around.
Right. And exactly right. And I think that was like actually an underflow bug or something. But like with Pandora, once they released that patch that had the improved AI, they started getting lots of negative reviews on Steam, and a lot of people were assuming that the AI was cheating. So, I think if you have a really strong AI, you have to find a way to make that like a special thing that the hardcore players get to, and you got to make sure that the average player doesn't run into it.
I
How do
agree
you-
So
completely.
How do you do that
so there's
though? How do you balance it out?
I don't know. I think Dominus Galaxia is going to be a very interesting social experiment if the AI is as difficult as they want to make it.
Oh no.
I don't mean that in a bad way. I hope the game is successful. I'm
I
just
know. I
saying it's a
know.
different approach.
It's
Well,
just
if they're catering to the hardcore crowd, then that it would be successful because it's catering to them.
Well, if you're catering to the hardcore crowd and you're trying to sell a game, it's by definition not going to be successful because the hardcore crowd is very small.
I mean by successful in making that crowd happy.
Oh, that's true. I agree. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
well, it's just time for those filthy casuals to get good. But well, the other thing too, the other type of AI that I've seen in games, well, like XCOM, right, is where the AI is not playing the same game as you at all, and there's no expectation that they are. Um, so it's not like here's an even playing field and there's 10 other players that are just fake humans and they're playing the exact same game as you, but it's more like a cinematic enemy. It's just like you encounter them, things happen, right? But it's all like smoke and mirrors and behind the curtain kind of thing. So
Right.
it's kind of like you get a director like in Left 4 Dead where it's like, it's about time that we screwed with this guy to keep it interesting, so let's drop some stuff in there.
Right. And XCOM is very asymmetric in that sense, right? But for X games, there's the expectation, because it came originally from Civ, that you and the AI are all starting at the same level and you're all expanding through the galaxy, and then eventually you're going to run into each other and interact with each other. So there's this expectation that there's a more level playing field between you and the AI, and I don't think you can get away with a lot of AI cheating in 4Xs.
Oh no, it's a different type of game. It would almost be like you're playing a 4X version of XCOM, right? Where it's
Right.
it's like you're defending your empire against whatever, and it's about building your economy, and not necessarily, do you have the advantage of knowing what's going on in their economy, because it's all smoke and mirrors kind of thing. It's just enough to dial up a challenge for your economic building. But yeah, I don't think that works in a Master of Orion type scenario, but I can think of some places where it kind of maybe would. Like what was that one that Brad just made? It was the Sorcerer King, I think it was, where
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like you're very much playing a 4X kind of thing, and then the AI, well, he already runs the map, so he doesn't really worry about his economy too much. It's just like how much do you draw the wrath of that thing down on you? So I think that's more of a cinematic enemy there, but it's a very particular situation that can happen in. I don't know, the reception of that game seemed kind of mixed as well.
Yeah, both of those, Sorcerer King and Rivals, they do have fairly mixed reception, which is kind of a shame. They look great, and they're supposed to be asymmetrical and all that, but it's not fun, And I guess that's the problem a lot of us run into is when we're playing the AI. We want to be challenged, but we don't want to be stomped, and we don't want to have it so easy. Like, oh, I see what you did. You're idiots. That's tough.
That's right. You want to beat them, but just barely, and you want to make sure that they're not stupid, right? That's pretty much how you want it to go.
Yeah, exactly. You want to feel like it's a hard-won victory, like it matters, like it's satisfying. You don't just want to win because I stomped them because they're stupid. That's not fun. Well, I guess sometimes it is, but
I do have a
Obviously-
question. Oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Hunter.
Oh, I was going to be off topic completely onto a different subject, but whatever.
go ahead.
I was actually going to ask Ray because it just occurred to me. So, like with Java and this game that you've made, like what are your limits? Like how big can this thing get?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked, actually. When I started doing some performance tuning, uh, partially just because I wanted to scale up the map so I could look for things like memory leaks and things like that, things you can't really find until you start really stressing it. You can play, I have a 32 gig laptop and I can play a map with 4 million stars on it.
4 million.
That's pretty nuts, dude.
Yeah, and no one should play that game. It's just there for me to test. But
Sure.
theoretically, I think if you downloaded the game and played it, there's like a maximum map setting, and what it does, it looks at your memory and it makes as big of a map as it thinks you can safely play without running out of memory. And it's usually like 1 million stars or something.
So with that in mind, could you potentially expand the scope of what your game can do then? Like I know it's supposed to be a direct like clone or homage to the original Masters of Orion. But like are there any like maybe additional features that you think could enhance based on what you just said?
Well, the original game, the maximum map size was 100 stars. So I think a lot of people know the original game doesn't really have much micromanagement in it. And if you scale past like 100 stars and go to like 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever, you'll quickly find out that the fleet management in the original game will break down. It's too hard to manage lots of fleets. So one thing we did is we took what I consider to be the most useless UI in the original game, the fleet screen, and we kind of reimagined it as a tool for doing mass deployments and mass transfers of fleets all at the same time. So you can say, I want, you know, all of my fleets like in this area, or all of my fleets that are doing this, I want them to go attack this system, or I want all these colonies that are making this ship, I want them to switch over to another ship, so that you could do these mass changes all at the same time. So that would kind of help with the large maps.
Okay, well not necessarily with the large maps though at this point. Would you consider like adding in newer types of content or gameplay to what you've already built?
Oh yeah, that's actually the plan, right? And the first release is going to be straight Master of Orion. So everyone who wanted a remade version of the original Master of Orion will get that game. And if they play it and they go back and say, I'd rather play the original Master of Orion, then I've done something wrong. But after that, I'm going to start adding features like leaders and more races and the Antarans and things like that, things that we saw in later iterations of Master of Orion, in like within the same rule system as the original game.
Nice.
Oh,
Very cool.
Oh, I dig it. I dig it. Now, if you could somehow merge this with Drox Operative, so I could be playing this, and then if I want to, I can click on my little guy and fly around in Drox Operative. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just that's the dream, but that's not happening. I know.
I don't even know what that game is, so I'm sorry.
Oh, it's basically kind of a Diablo in space, but you're playing a mercenary while the computer plays a 4X around you. And you could work for the empires as they play the 4X. It's really quite great.
I can't speak to that, but one thing I've been mulling over with the writer a little bit is how to be able to play the Antarans from the other side of the map, to where you're the Antarans and you're trying to stop the other races from expanding.
Oh, that would be awesome.
My interest is piqued.
Or maybe what you do is you add alternate dimensions, like in Star Trek or whatever, like Master of Magic. Where you have the underground level and like you have alternate dimensions that you could slip in through, like in wormholes and stuff. That'd be great.
There'll be wormholes for sure.
Oh, Where will they take you? Other parts of the map or other dimensions, or what are we talking?
Probably just other parts of the maps, but you'll be able to get to the Antarans probably through the wormholes when we do that. We're still working all that out.
I like everything I'm hearing. Honestly.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but it's probably going to be another year's worth of work before the first iteration of the game is done.
Well, I was just about to bring that up. You said you have at least another year to go. Now it's interesting because we have so many 4X games coming out, right? Like this, like I think in the last month we had 2 major expansions, and then this month alone we have 2 big 4Xs that came out. Do you, since you have a lengthy development period, do you watch what other 4Xs are doing, and like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I like that idea. Like, do you get inspiration from any of these other like 4Xs at all, or are you just totally focused on what you're doing?
Well, the feature set for the first release is pretty much set, but I will admit that I love the genre and I love reading player comments about how they think they can fix a problem or what would be a good feature.
Ooh.
And you get a lot of good ideas from people, right?
Sure, of course. Of course. Because yeah, there's just so, like, does that worry you at all about your game is free, I know, but like there's so much saturation right now. I mean, and again, you're not competing for dollars, but at the same time you are competing for visibility. So is that, I mean, there's so much out and so much still coming out. Does that concern you at all?
Not too much, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it's kind of a long game you have to play, but every one of these other games are being made by commercial entities for profit. And so the successes of these games are going to rise and fall based upon whether or not the creator thinks it's profitable to continue making it, right? I mean, as much as I really appreciate what Wargaming did by bringing back the franchise, they announced it, released it, and now they're kind of not even supporting it, right? So there's no guarantee with any of these commercial games that in 3 or 4 or 5 years they're even going to be making them, or maybe with Stellaris they're going to scrap the whole thing and make Stellaris 2, and they'll have to reinvent the wheel all over again. So I can't worry about that, and they'll never match my price point. So
Yeah, as I heard at the Master of Orion, like the main dude left.
Oh,
so
really?
It's just like, well, there won't be any more of that. Yeah.
That's really disappointing too. I mean, I thought they did a great job with that game. It has a lot of polish, and I really think if they'd have just spent some more time with it and kept fleshing it out, kind of like Paradox is doing with Stellaris,
Yeah.
I think it would be a big player in the market right now.
They had a really solid base. Like right now, I like to think of it as a very good introductory 4X, but through DLC and patches and whatnot, it could have been a very competitive product, ultimately. And it doesn't sound like it's going to get that opportunity, which is a real shame because it's a new Master.
But it's
of
not a
Orion.
bad game. I mean, it's
No,
like
No, it's actually pretty good.
Somebody that's getting into
I'm not-
4Xs, that's the one to go for.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a bad game. It's just it's I'd say it's more on the simpler side of 4Xs, and that's a good thing for a beginner. But I think one of the things, like, I think you had all these experienced players that like were like, oh, I'll just go back to playing Master of Orion 2 because this is just too simple for me.
Well, unfortunately, I think they fell into the same trap that a lot of indie developers who are making Master of Orion clones fell into. And that's the idea of saying this game is inspired by Master of Orion 2, or like with Daunus Galaxia, Master of Orion 1. And it sounds great at the beginning because all these Master of Orion 2 fans, and there's millions of them apparently, get excited and jump on the project and go, all right, you're going to make Master of Orion 2. And then what happens is there's like a bait and switch that occurs. It's like, well, it's going to be Master of Orion 2, but we're going to do this. It's going to have real-time combat, or it's going to have this. And all of a sudden, these fans who've been waiting for a Master of Orion 2 feel betrayed. I mean, and there's a lot of games that carry this banner around, like, oh, it's going to be inspired by this game. And I just think that's kind of a mistake to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's so many games they're basically chasing a dragon. and I mean, Master of Orion 1 and 2 were products of their time, and there's a nostalgia there, but there's also a design philosophy that's like kind of rooted in the 90s. And I think that's why like certain 4Xs like Soar of the Stars and Distant Worlds that like pretty much completely eschewed that and threw off that threw that off and just did their own thing. I think that's probably why they're seen as more bright spots of the genre than God, what Horizon? Remember that one? Or oh God, Stars and Shadow? That just came and went recently. Like, that wasn't bad, but
Right. So like I'm not playing that game, right? My
right.
game is inspired by Mu 1, but I am actually not changing it. And like when I have an alpha, sometimes a Mu 1 player will say, "Oh, the original game was like this." And I'm going, "Oh, you're right." And I'll actually change it back because it, that's like my key focus, right? I don't want to kind of betray that trust because
Right.
I'm making this game for myself too, right? I want to play a modernized Master of Orion 1.
Right. It sounds like the changes you have made are quality of life changes, like the fleet screen, which was one of the weakest parts of the original game. Let's be honest. That was, oh God, just trying to think about that fleet screen. That
Right.
was,
And the fleet screen we have now is actually
a lot better. Yeah,
it's almost revolutionary. There's no other 4X game that has the fleet management capabilities we have in this game. They just don't do it because it's kind of a late game issue, and we've actually solved this problem, and no other 4X game has. I think the closest to have come to this is Gal Civ. They have like a little interface for querying fleets, right? And I mean, if anyone ever played this game on a large map, you can't play it without that fleet UI because
yeah.
it's just so useful.
Distant Worlds also does a good job with it's got a sidebar where you can just select all your fleets easily and make new fleets with a few button clicks. So I see what you mean though. And that game also, have you played that one?
A little bit. The interface is really hard to get into.
Yeah, I agree. It's come a long way since its initial release. I don't know if you've played Universe, but yeah, it is. It's a struggle at first. It really is a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. It is worth overcoming. It took me about a week to overcome it. Maybe about 4 or 5 hours of playing over a week to finally start having it click with me. But yeah, no, I see what you mean because that game has huge maps and there's tons and tons of ships, and managing that is really important. Even in the early game, when you have all these scouts doing stuff or colony ships or whatever. You know, it's real, and it's. I didn't even really play with your fleet screen much, but now that I know I can do all that, I'm gonna go back after this show and and fiddle with it.
We'll see,
Okay.
like on the fleet screen, you don't even have to select fleets. You can just, there's a checkbox. You can say, I want, select all the fleets that have fighters in them, and they'll just light up on the screen. And you can just say, okay, deploy these fleets to the system, right?
Oh
And
my God,
boom, they all go, right?
I did not do any of that when I was playing. Because I think my experience with the fleet screen in the original Master of Orion was negative enough that I barely even looked at it in your game. Oh, that was a mistake. Uh,
And it's not really that useful until you have lots of fleets, right? It's more of an in-game type feature.
Yeah, I was getting there at the end. Like this game that I recorded, I kept playing after I stopped recording, and I did start having quite a few ships. But I didn't really do much with the fleet screen. I just clicked them on the map like you did in the original game, because that's what they wanted you to do. It felt like. So now I'm gonna go back and try that fleet screen. That sounds amazing. But yeah, it sounds like those are the kind of changes you want to make in a modern Master of Orion iteration. Is you don't change the core gameplay, but you make it more accessible, through, UI improvements and whatnot, which it sounds like what you've done.
Yeah, I agree. And you have to think about like where did the game start breaking in the original game, and what can I change to make it not break, right?
Yeah, and with a lot of games, for me at least, the mid and the late games are almost always a problem in a lot of 4X games because
It's a notorious problem,
yeah, because it either starts getting boring or unmanageable. Yeah, or
Or both.
or both. Yeah, exactly. Um, that's one of the reasons I really liked Master of Orion, because you can only have so many fleets, and you can only have such a large map. I mean, such a size of a map that it never gets unmanageable. But you're always moving and doing something because there's fleets to move and whatnot. And oh, I just bombarded that colony to oblivion. Now I want to take it over, so let's move that colony. So it was a much more active game than like say Stellaris, where oh, it's the mid game now. We're gonna have you put everything into sectors and take control away from you, huh? Why? No, stop.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. I'm a big believer in
Yeah.
no automation for the player. Everything the player does, every action he takes has a reaction. And if you need the computer to do something for a player, you should abstract that out of the game.
Oh. Well, again, that's Distant Worlds does a very good job with that, because you can turn automation on and off for a wide variety of things. I know some people play
Yeah,
it
you can
fully manually.
you can go with just one chip. One
Yeah,
chip and
that-
control only one chip, let
Mhm.
everything else be automated, and that's totally cool.
That's how I learned the game. Actually, was I started with one ship, and then I unlocked a few more, and then a few more, and then I unlocked fleet control. I turned that to manual. So maybe that's how you got to do it. It's a great game
Yeah,
if
that
you have
game
time.
has a notorious learning curve, though.
It does. I will say it's worth it, but you're making a game. You only have so much time in the world. I understand, but it's if you have some time to kill, I was just gonna say it's worth pushing through that curve.
You're not going to convince me, but I
Okay,
appreciate it.
all right, that's fair. That's fair. I understand. I've tried to convince many people to play that game, and then they play it for like an hour and they're like, nope, and then they return it, and I'm like, okay, I understand. It's not for everyone.
Actually, that's kind of the worst thing about developing a game is when I come home and I finally have some time to spend, I
Yeah.
work on the game. I don't get to play. I develop. And so when I did this last alpha, which was, I don't know, about a month ago, I was actually very, very surprised to get so much positive feedback because as the developer, every time I pull up the game, all I see are bugs I still need to fix, features that are still missing. I hear a soundtrack that I've already heard 1,000 times, so I mute it as
Right.
soon as I start the game. So when people approach the game with fresh eyes and they tell me that they're playing it and they're having fun, that actually surprised me quite a bit.
Well, I think whereas you're seeing all these problems, and you're very clear on your page that this is an alpha. Every iteration you have a post about like this is alpha, this is alpha, this is alpha. And I think because of that transparency, people come to it being more forgiving, as they should, because it's an alpha. But also I think it's early access is a weird thing, and certain people come to it with the expectation of a finished game. Where I think when you have something like this, you're going to attract the type of player who knows that you say it's an alpha, it's not finished, I'm going to try it anyway. Because this is not on Steam. So I think someone finding this already has to be actively looking for it. You know, so you're probably going to give it a different type of player than someone just browsing through Steam, looking for some junk to play. Oh, this is
And when I
stupid.
Well, you haven't had a transaction, right?
That too.
So they don't have a promise of or a false impression that
That
they're
too.
going to have a finished
point.
product or a certain level of whatever.
Good point.
Another thing too is when I release the alpha, I have to release it in a different state than most players expect from companies because that's why you saw like what 20 patches over the first 3 weeks or whatever as I addressed bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have like a QA team that I can give the game to and let them run it through its paces for a week before I release the alpha. The people who download my game and play the game are the QA team, right? I mean, there's nobody else. So when I first release an alpha, it feels very raw and there's a lot of obvious bugs in there. And I try to fix them as quickly as I can. But like you said, I think it feels more like an alpha because of that.
Right. And yeah, so all that stuff comes together to, I think, like when people buy early access games on Steam, for example, it really skews because one, they're paying for it, like Jim said, but two, I think when people see a game on Steam, they have an expectation that it's finished or close to finished or something like that. And because you're completely independent, I think people come to you with a slightly different expectation, which it sounds like it helps you ultimately.
Well,
it's like
learning. Go
it's
ahead.
like
I'm sorry.
people on Steam treat early access as like play the game early, not play the game when it's a busted like half game. So and they get enraged, you know. It's almost like, well, we want late beta early access. And it's like, well, that's not really, and that's kind of when devs get into the problem of like they use early access as a funding model,
Ugh.
then that's when that bad thing happens.
So if you're giving somebody a game and they're giving you money in return, a transaction has occurred, and I think the person who receives that game and plays it and is disappointed has every much as right to complain about the quality of it as anyone who bought a released game. I mean, early access is just a name, and it's kind of, honestly, I think it's kind of an excuse to get away with releasing unfinished products, like you said, to get funding.
I
And
don't think that's true in every case, but I will say that it's true in probably a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, when they state right off the bat, we're going to have an early access period of a few months just to hammer out the bugs and get it released to a wider audience, but we're only going to be in for a few months.
Right.
That's cool.
As opposed to the Tim Schafer deal where it's like, yeah, we're gonna make space-based DF9, and we're gonna live hand to mouth. So if you guys quit buying, we're gonna quit developing.
Now,
It's
I'd
like, oh,
contrast that with, say, the Pulsar devs, which are a very small team. There's only a couple guys working on it, and it has been in early access for a couple years. But you know what? They're working on it, and they're putting out regular patches. They've got a lot of transparency going, and they've got a lot of goodwill with the community. So that, I would say, it's a better model in terms of if you're going to be in early access for a few years, then be transparent about it.
Actually, I think that's a really good point. I think when developers are very transparent, even if it's about bugs or mistakes, but there's this constant communication between the developer and the players, even if it's just the developer giving out notices and stuff and occasionally answering questions, that goes a long way towards making players feel more forgiving of problems. If you have a developer that kind of ghosts and disappears and then every 6 months comes up and asks for money, well, yeah, people are not going to like that.
Limit theory.
wait, what?
Maybe so, right?
Wait, what? Is he asking for
Sorry.
money? Is he asking for money
No,
again?
I'm just saying like he goes away for like half a year and then doesn't say anything and then comes back and is like, "Oh, hey, I'm back."
He's like, I've been updating Twitter. I never left. Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah,
enough of that.
We're
and
not
I'm a
better.
big believer
We're
in
not better.
transparency. I think anyone who goes to my dev blog and can see that, how many updates I've put out since the game out. I'm a big believer in being transparent about what's going on.
Yeah, one thing people cannot accuse you of is not updating your blog. That's you're very, very, very amazingly active when it comes to your blog, which is great. Because
So, what's interesting too about this whole process is you find out exactly how thick or thin your skin is.
oh really?
Yeah, because you'll be surprised how much criticism is crafted as constructive, or like people who'll criticize things, that's something that's very subjective, right? And you'll find, and they'll tell you all these things you need to be doing. I don't know how many people have told me how to write code, and I've been writing code for 25 years, and then I found out that they're not even a programmer in real life, right? So
Wait,
I don't know
wait,
how to
wait.
respond to that.
Wait, what? So people tell you how to write code even though they don't write code?
Yeah, I think there was a guy once who started asking me about the AI, and they started giving me all these suggestions about how to write an AI and how I should do it. And so I'm like, oh, so you do AI programming, right? And he goes, no. And I go, well, you're a computer programmer? And he goes, no. He was just regurgitating stuff he'd read on Wikipedia, right?
Oh, for
And was
God's
acting like
I
an
watched a
expert.
couple of YouTube videos and now I'm ready.
For God's sakes. I bumped
But that
elbows.
actually happens a lot, right?
Uh,
So I tell like the writer, I've told the graphic designer, I've told the illustrator, your work is going to go up on the blog. And when you read comments, be prepared to have somebody who knows nothing about the professional skills involved in doing this criticize it, right? And you just have to kind of let it roll off your skin, right? Just ignore it because that's just kind of a fact of life.
My response to those things are always, "Why so salty?"
Well, that's also a luxury of me not being a commercial entity, right? Like developers and corporations that make games, if somebody makes an unreasonable criticism, they can't really respond like they want to respond because ultimately they want that person's money, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Whereas I'm kind of liberated from that. I can just kind of tell them what I think, right? I can respond in kind, and then they can criticize me for having a thin skin, but I'm just reacting like a normal person would react. If you came into my house and told me I wasn't, doing my hobby right, it would be kind of weird.
that would be kind of weird.
Even though that just sounded overly defensive, and I know that, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, just ask them next time. Next time you like, anytime I see someone who does that kind of stuff, I'm like, well, I could do it better, or I'm smarter than you are. I'm like, all right, well then, what are you doing with it? Like, how about you make a game? Like, that's usually my response to that kind of stuff. Like, where's your examples of doing it where you think it's supposed to be done?
Yeah, I think one time a guy was giving me all these suggestions for a new race, and I'm going, "Oh, that's great. A new race costs me about $1,500. So
whoa, what?
give me
Oh,
$1,500, and yeah, the artwork and all
oh,
this
the
other stuff that
art
has to
and
be done, right?
the
Yeah,
writing and the
and that's probably
translating. Yeah.
conservative. That's probably conservative.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I kind of want to ask how much you probably feel you've invested into this project, but that's probably personal. And
No, I don't care. Let me think about this for a second. If I had to project what I think my ultimate out-of-pocket expenses will be when the first version is done, I'm gonna just spitball and say about $20,000.
that's, and again, you're not asking for any money back for this. Now, is this going to be a resume builder, for example? Maybe something
No,
like
I'm probably
that?
gonna retire in a few years. I don't need to build my resume for anything.
Oh my god.
But I mean, so contrast that to people. Um, I don't know, like someone who takes $100,000 in a Kickstarter and doesn't make a game. I'm thinking, well, I can make a game for 20,000 plus my living expenses over the course of the game. So I don't understand how people can take a lot of money in Kickstarter, run out, and then act like, you know,
I wouldn't
they
be
gave it their best effort.
I wouldn't be surprised if like they get all the money and then they're like, "Oh, we have to get offices and we have to get all these
Hookers and
things."
blow.
Yeah, and we have to. In fact, we have to open studios in 4 different countries.
Oh, no. Oh, we
Get some
have to
stop
have
motion video.
We have to have doors that look like the
Hey,
spaceship. You have to have
listen,
those
how about we
doors.
get? We're gonna go on a motion capture adventure, and
And we have to hire these big actors.
I mean,
uh,
I don't want to take money from people because it creates all these financial and legal and
it
emotional and
really
ethical obligations
does.
that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it really does. Like that's why the game we were just talking about, there's so many emotions wrapped up in it because of all the money flowing around it. It's kind of fascinating and heartbreaking to see at the same time.
Maybe I'm just kind of speaking from a luxury position of, I have a full-time job and I can afford this, so maybe it's just easier for me to say that.
No, it's fine. Like I was saying, there was another game, Astrox. Great game, by the way. It's basically like a kind of combat mining open world game. It's really a lot of fun. The developer's like, yeah, if this fails, it's fine. Whatever, I'm good. Because he wasn't relying on it financially. He already had an income from something else. This is just a project of love, and he was charging money for it. But at the same time, he probably would have been fine not doing so. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting how not being again financially dependent on a project can really change your perspective. Because yeah,
Right, and
sorry,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's great if it's successful and sells a lot of copies, but ultimately, and this is coming from my own experience as well in development, is it paying for itself? If it does, then awesome. Anything beyond that is it's just icing on the cake.
Exactly. All right, we should
So,
start.
like,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, in my case, the thing I worry about is burnout, right? If you work on something for too long, you start feeling burned out. And so I usually take about a month off twice a year where I don't even touch the game. And open sourcing it is like my, final answer. If I just totally burn out on the game, I can just release the source and say, you guys carry it across the finish line if for some reason I can't do that.
And people would open sourcing a game. Like look at free space, for example. Open sourcing a game can give it such a new life. It's really amazing. So sorry, go ahead.
This has been a great talk. I heard seemed like you're about to wrap it up, and I hope you don't mind, but I would like to let people know about another podcast that I'm a semi-regular on, the Forex Gaming Podcast. They talk about Forex games. It's a great podcast.
As long as you don't say Explorminate, because those guys, man.
Fuck those guys. No, we're kidding. We love them.
So anyway, we're going to make sure to plug you guys on our next one too. But if you like Forex games, it's a great podcast, and I think you should listen to it.
Where can folks find that?
If you go to Reddit and the Forex Gaming subreddit, there'll be a link, and that you can get to the podcast there. They're really nice. I have to admit, they're really well done. Oh, and my website, if anybody's interested in the game, I don't know if you've mentioned it or not, is Remnants of the Precursors.com.
Yeah.
So if you want to go download the alpha, it's totally free. As long as you've got Java 8 installed, you should be able to play it on Linux, Windows, or a Mac.
Is it just called the Forex Gaming Podcast? And does it have 8 episodes?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I found it. Okay.
They do one about every 2 weeks.
I will definitely include that in the show notes. It's also good to know we have a competitor, so I hope you crash and burn. Just gonna throw that out.
Well, that's fair.
I'm so kidding.
That's fair.
I'm so kidding.
No.
I'm so kidding. No.
No. I know you're joking, but actually, you might enjoy it. I mean, it is strategy game podcast.
No, I'll totally listen. I'll totally listen.
We'll send Nate over to kneecap him for us.
I'll totally listen to it, and yeah, folks, there'll be a link.
Well, he's a doctor, right? He knows where to him.
Is he?
So, yeah.
Folks,
Nate's a doctor.
You can go to it's forexgaming.libsyn.com right now. That's where you can download the episodes. I'll also be including a link to this in the show notes on the MP3 audio version of the podcast. So they'll definitely.
Yeah, or you could just go to the subreddit and it'll be linked on the top.
What's the subreddit? It's like Forex Gaming. There it is.
Forex Gaming.
Thanks, AC Wraith.
AC Wraith.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the Libsyn thing at least. But no, that's great. So look, let's see. You've already talked about Stellaris and Endless Space 2. So no, that's great. That's great. We definitely need more people talking about these things. Hopefully developers will listen and start making better games. Sorry. I'm not bitter. Anyway, so yeah, no, that's great. How'd you start that podcast? I mean, you're making a game, so.
The guy who runs that podcast is Rob, and he's the guy who created the Explorminate website.
Wait,
and when he left that website, yeah, he's the moderator for the Forex Gaming subreddit, and he started that podcast, and somehow I got shuffled in as a guest podcaster, so I've been on it a few times.
So he's competing with his own creation? It sounds like
somewhat.
Sort of.
Are you really competing if you're doing it for free? I mean, I don't understand.
I guess people only have so much time in the day.
You can only listen to one podcast. And
I'm just saying.
So
I will tell you guys,
all your
I
other
had to cut
podcasts.
since my commute got shorter, I had to cut out a lot of podcasts from my rotation
Because I'm pretty sure that social media is pretty much built on the idea of mutual back scratching, right?
I guess.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah,
surprising.
no, I'm just surprised to find out that Rob was doing that because he was like so beat for time once he like started his fireman career.
Yeah.
And stuff. So, well, maybe that's why they're only like every 2 weeks too.
That makes
right,
sense.
and he didn't do the last one. He left us to do it without him. So
the Explorminate guys, they pump out the shows very, very regularly. So I guess it kind of makes sense.
Well, they have to raise money to pay for Nate's XCOM addiction. Is what it is. He's
oh dear.
He's got a serious XCOM problem.
He really does. All right, so folks, the game again, Remnants of the Precursors. You can download it for free at remnantsoftheprecursors.com. Again, there'll be there on the stream. There's a link below on YouTube, but there'll also be a link on the show notes. The show notes for the show once this goes live as an MP3 you can download. And the podcast is the 4X Gaming Podcast. It's relatively new, but it looks like they're covering all the awesome bases. So go check that out. Again, there will be a link for that as well. So that's pretty awesome. Couple of show notes. Our contest ended, and I haven't. I'm sorry to the folks listening. I just haven't had time to pick the winners yet, but I'll probably be doing that within a week. So thank you to everyone who left reviews for us on iTunes. Even if we're not running a contest, please leave a review for us on iTunes because that actually helps. Next week on the show, we're going to be talking to the developer of the just funded today space station simulator, Astrobase Command. They're running a Kickstarter, and they just got funded this very day.
Wait, is this the Space Station 13 thing, or this is a different thing?
This is like it's a 70s themed space station sim, and you're managing it from like a virtual, like a desk on the station. So it's very immersive. It looks really cool.
So is this being done by the guy that did the it was like Daisy and stuff? Because he was trying to do
Maybe
like
I'm not sure.
A Space Station 13-ish kind of thing for a while. Yeah, I'll have to look.
I'm not sure.
If it is, man, it's going to devolve into a Daisy night. So
I hope not.
Yeah.
And for Thursday's LAN party, to coincide with the release of Endless Space 2, we're going to play a game that surprisingly we haven't played because it has co-op and everything. Dungeon of the Endless.
I thought you were going to say genital jousting. Damn it.
Oh, no. What does that have to do with Endless Space 2? It's endless.
Oh, that's a video game now?
Oh, yes. I will send you a copy. That's our parting gift for being on the show.
Do not accept this.
You get a choice of that, or poop in your soup, or
do not accept
shower with your dad's simulator.
These
are all friends of ours here.
That'll be our gift bag for every guest from now on. Is just a bunch of keys for these games. It'll be like a good. Well, you know, when you go to a thing and you get a goodie bag, you know, this will be.
It's the equivalent of a bag of dicks. That is exactly.
We should call
pretty much
digital bag of dicks.
There is a video that I occasionally link to.
Dick in a Box. What's that song?
It's unfortunately Brian could not be present at the time due to common sense. But Hunter and Dan did show up, and we were most offended. I've never been so offended by pixels on my screen. I was just like, "Wow, this is a thing." Okay. So anyway, I keep plugging that game, and I don't mean to.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah. Let's stop talking about that game. So,
hey,
pun
Brian,
intended. Plugging.
Yes.
Brian and everyone else whose name I don't remember, I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks for that.
Absolutely, man. We'll have to get you back on when you add more content.
Yeah, Ray, we'll definitely have you back in like a year when the game is done, or gold or 1.0 or whatever you feel is ready to.
Or it becomes the most played 4X game in the world.
Oh, yeah, it will.
Hey, someone asked earlier. Hang on, I'm sorry. Someone asked earlier and I forgot. Because it can be run on a variety of platforms. Will it be able to be run on mobile? Like, could someone run this on a tablet if they want?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, first of all, it'll run on a Windows tablet.
Oh,
straight up, because it's Windows, right? As far as As far as Android, I think there's a possibility I may be able to compile it, the Java program, into an executable. I haven't looked into that. And if I can do that, then I may be able to use some intermediary software where you can run it on an Android system. I don't know for sure, but zero
Well-
chance for iOS.
Well, if you can run it on a Raspberry Pi,
Yeah.
that runs a Linux distro, right?
That's correct.
So I mean, in theory, it should be able to run on Android.
Yeah, because Android is based on Linux. So,
Well, it's running on Linux through Java, the JVM, and the Java JVM
Gotcha.
does not run on Android. So it would
Gotcha.
have to be an executable. So if I can create an executable out of it, I think we might be able to run it on Android.
Well, that'd be pretty awesome.
that'd be
Because
amazing.
then I could play it on my NVIDIA Shield.
And the AI is straightforward. I mean, the UI is straightforward enough that it could easily be played on a tablet, I think, because the buttons are nice and big, and it's just some simple dragging and whatnot.
Right.
So-
And I do want to tell everybody who's played it and who's already having fun, I just want to remind you all, it's not finished. There's more races, there's more features to go in, and all I can tell you is it won't get worse. It'll have to get better, right? It'll have to finish the game. So if you already like it now, you may like it more when it's done.
It can only go up from here, basically. So
And it's already in a good place.
It's
So,
already a
yeah,
good place.
there's that.
Like I said, I've put like an hour or so in it. I had a great time playing it. I really did. So, folks, again, free. You can't argue with free. Remnants of the
FREE
Right.
free.
It'll run
And
on your thing. Just get it and play it on whatever thing you have. It'll run on it. You have a Vita,
And it's-
it'll run on that. You got you got an old Apple IIe, probably run on that. So
Did you see that cartoon? I forget who posted it in the Discord, but it was there was the scientist. They're like, here's the IT professional or the IT scientist versus the sysadmin, right? And,
Oh,
and
I've
it was
seen
like
this.
the IT guy is like, oh, this strange alien computer, who knows what mysteries it will hold if we can only figure out how it works. And then the sysadmin's like, dude, I got Doom to run on this thing. And
oh, fucking N-Gage. Yeah, good job, Teeth. I forgot about the N-Gage. Oh God.
So Brian, I know you're trying to wrap this up, but I want to
Yeah,
mention one thing
that's fine.
about free.
It's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
So actually one of the things I have to fight against is the stigma of it being free.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
most games that are free are either free because they suck or they're free because they're going to inundate you with ads.
and microtransactions.
Right. And this game is not free for any of those reasons.
you could pack it
It's
full
free-
of fake
it's
ads for
free.
space products.
It's free because I can afford to make it free. Right. And that's the only reason it's free. I can afford to make it free. And there's no ads or microtransactions or anything like that in it.
And that is, again, amazing, folks. Again, this game is free. You should play it. If you like anything 4X related at all, it is really, really great. And, good news. The stream only had 2.5 dropped frames this week. That's amazing. Yay. Time Warner's getting better, I think. I hope. No, that's really good. A couple weeks ago, like, we were dropping every other freaking frame. So, no, this is great. So, yeah, Ray, thank you for not only coming on the show, but for making this really impressive free game. You know?
And for your next trick, you'll fix
been fun
Master
for
of
me.
Orion 3.
I'm sorry, that's the impossible dream. There's no way to do that.
There are
right?
people have told me I should play it with mods, and I'm like, nah, I don't know. I don't think so. No, I don't want to. I really don't. It looks so bad.
Well, where did that game go wrong? Is it because it abstracted too much away from the player? Like people wanted to
I
micromanage
think
stuff
that's
and they
part
just
of
took
it.
it all away?
It sounded
Or
like
what?
the gentleman that we were talking about earlier, Alan Emmerich. It sounded like they brought him on the beginning, and he left because they weren't listening to him. That's what I learned. That's what I read about.
They had
And-
design A, and it was taking too long, so they fired the team
Ugh.
and then patched it all together without finishing the design, and so it's kind of a half-finished mess. And honestly, Master of Orion 3 single-handedly killed the franchise, right? I mean, as soon as that game came out, people were immediately saying there's probably never going to be another Master of Orion. It was that bad. So for someone to say
but
now,
I'm wondering,
it's
was
crazy.
it because it was that bad, or because it was that different than expectations? I guess that's the root of the question. Like, it might have been a good game hidden under like something impenetrable.
From what I understand, it was terrible. From what I understand, everyone I've talked to said it was just a horrendous mess that you couldn't understand or have fun with.
Well, I'm gonna have to run over to Good Old Games and do some science.
I trust Tom Chick,
Science it.
and
Yeah.
read his review on it. If you read his review, it's very spot on. Okay, you don't like Tom Chick, but I trust him.
No,
he has good reviews.
Tom left me curbside one day.
Oh,
it was like I was gonna ride in his Jeep, and then he was like, "Ah, man, you're gonna have to get a cab." And yeah.
Did I trigger you? Is that what happened?
No, it's just the thing I rub him about. But Quarter to Three, I'm actually the guy that built the site originally.
Wow,
It was
that's
like
impressive.
back in '98. It wasn't at the time. It was just like of the 3 or 4 of us, I was the only one that knew HTML, so I kind of smacked it together, and then Chet and Eric from Old Man Murray kind of picked up the hosting, and they took it from there. So, but the look of the site, that crappy blue gradient stuff, yeah, that's totally my art. I can't believe they've preserved it for 20 something years.
The GOG version of Master of Orion 3 is still $10. That seems.
Are they giving you the $10, or you have to pay it?
Sadly,
in fact,
no.
that's
Sadly,
what Tom paid me for making the site, was $10. So it'll be
$9.99.
so I could afford that now. If I had invested wisely, I would have.
Folks, if you listen to this podcast, and you're like, I want to see how bad Master of Orion 3 truly is, wait for a sale. Really, don't pay $10 for this. Just there are better ways to spend $10 than Master of Orion 3. Oh God. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening and for watching. Everyone, thank you for being a great co-host as always. Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We will see you next time on the show. Have a great night, everyone. Good night.